All right, guys. I'm here with Mr. Alan Aragon. He's with me on the Ask Coach Ben podcast, and I'm really happy to have Mr. Aragon on. And I'm going to be honest, I have been waiting 5 years for Joe Rogan to invite you onto his podcast, so you could, kind of tell the world how to eat, how nutrition is, and more importantly, kind of dispel some of the myths out there. How come you never got on there, Alan? Or is that or is that still in the works?
Joe's publicist, I think it was his publicist, one of Joe's dudes, Matt Staggs, invited me onto the show in 2013 or 2014. So yeah, long time ago. And this was, I think during the time when one of the first or earlier appearances of Rob Wolf. And it was during a time when I was on a role of critiquing the paleo diet. And so, of course, Rob Wolf being a proponent of the paleo diet and extolling its various virtues and such, I think that maybe Joe's people or Joe himself got wind of the fact that I had some things to say about the paleo diet. And he invited me on, and of course, during that time, I just wasn't available, schedule-wise, travel-wise, doing a lot of conference speaking, and we just couldn't sync up our schedules. And so he actually invited me on a second time. Well, actually, Matt Staggs emailed me a second time and said, "Hey, we'd like to have you on again," and this was in 2015, when Gary Taubes, 2015 or 2016, the years kind of escape me now, but Gary Taubes was on the show, and so the time was ripe for me to get on there and provide a counterpoint for Gary Taubes' view on low carb dieting and carbs are evil and that whole thing. And the same problem was in play, which was an inability for Joe and I to sync up our traveling schedules and our availability. So he was, calling UFC fights when I was available to talk, and I was traveling and speaking at conferences when he was available. And so that was done. That was that. The latest round, at the beginning of this year, I let Matt know that I'm stopping in for my semi-annual tap on the shoulder to let him know that I'm available to get on the show. And so I gave him my availability for the next 4-ish months, and that came and went. So here we are again, man. It's just been kind of a sort of a unfortunate deal as far as availability goes, and who knows. And my hypothesis now is that Joe has been able to get a lot of truly big names on his show to the degree that a relative complete unknown like myself wouldn't really have much of a place on the Joe Rogan podcast. So
I would I would disagree with you in I know you're being humble, but you're definitely not a no name, and I think that we need to back up a little bit and kind of tell the people listening who you are. I usually, people that listen to my podcast, however many few there are usually going to be MMA fighters, MMA coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, people looking for nutrition advice, and a lot of my own jiu-jitsu students. So I mean, you know this, but I'm a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, and I have a couple academies. So a lot of my students actually listen to the podcast. So can you just describe who you are and what got you here to this point in the fitness and nutrition world? And I know all of it about you, but some of the listeners might not.
Okay. My story is kind of different, kind of unique. I started off in the personal training world, and I was completing my well, I completed my undergraduate degree in nutrition, food science, and dietetics. And so that was while I was working as a personal trainer. And so the original plan was to just go full into personal training and just make a career of that and have a nutrition degree, just to kind of have an edge in the market. And as far as just, it was important for me to have a scientifically based knowledge of nutrition versus just kind of reading stuff here and there. So I went the university route. I just kind of got bitten by the bug to pursue a graduate degree. From that point, I was beginning to see that I was really interested in the science part of nutrition. And so as I transitioned from personal training to nutritional counseling, I simultaneously got my graduate degree in nutrition. And then I got more and more interested into the research aspect of it, to the point where I started reading a lot more research and critiquing research, and I started a research review back in 2008. Thought of it in 2007, but didn't get started on it until 2008. So I started doing that, and as I was critiquing research, I was personally contacting researchers, and I personally contacted a researcher named Brad Schoenfeld. And I asked for permission to, I actually asked him to send me one of his papers that I could possibly critique in my research review. And then he was like, yeah, go for it, and he was all about transparency and critique, scientific discussion, and peer review, which was a really great thing for me to be exposed to, because that was one of the first times that I saw a researcher, a scientist, kind of set his ego aside and let basically a nobody, nitpick at his work. And so everything kind of snowballed from that point as far as my career in research goes. So from that point, this was about 2013. Well, actually, I critiqued Brad's article in 2011. From 2013 onward, Brad just started inviting me onto his research projects, and we both went on to co-author some highly influential work in the sports nutrition realm. So the first paper that we did together was titled Nutrient Timing Revisited: Is There an Anabolic Window? And this was a narrative review kind of critiquing the state of the science on the so-called post-exercise anabolic window of opportunity, which is a kind of a mythical period within an hour post-workout, where if you don't take in quickly digested and absorbed protein and carbohydrate, then you severely compromise your gains. And so that was the long-standing lore that was pretty much in play since the early 2000s. So people genuinely believed that. And Brad and I questioned it. We wrote our paper on it in 2013, and that paper pretty much went viral. I'm always proud and happy to mention that it's the most viewed article in the history of the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition. So
I'm making a note about this, because I'm making a note about nutrient timing, because I want to get back to that, because we're going to focus more on combat athletes and sports, things,
cool.
as opposed to bodybuilding. So making a note, just letting you know.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Yeah, sure. And so that was what I would like to think of kind of a paradigm shifting paper in the collective thinking of the sports and nutrition community. And what we did from that point was we did a meta-analysis of the research, which is a look at the collective body of studies that examined the so-called anabolic window, or timing nutrients within this post-exercise anabolic window, and how it affected muscle hypertrophy or muscle growth and muscular strength gains. So we did a meta-analysis, which is a study of the studies, This was me, Brad Schoenfeld, and a researcher named James Krieger. And that was another thing that kind of led to a lot of questions amongst the sports nutrition community and a lot of changed thought on the anabolic window thing. And then we followed that up with a randomized controlled trial directly comparing immediate pre-exercise protein ingestion with immediate post-exercise protein ingestion. And we didn't find any significant difference in effects on body composition and strength with that. So I guess as far as the research contributions go on my end, we kind of gradually dismantled the idea that there was this narrow post-exercise window of opportunity to make your recovery and your gains. And we kind of alerted the sports nutrition audience to a more holistic look at the whole process of improving strength gains and size gains.
How much shit did you get for that? How much backlash did you get for dispelling that myth?
Quite a bit, man. Quite a bit. Especially from the researchers who did the seminal work. John Ivey and Robert Portman wrote a book called Nutrient Timing in 2004. And John Ivey actually had a debate with Brad, kind of off the record as well as on the record. And the on the record debate was published, I forgot what journal it was, but it was a point counterpoint thing. And, in my opinion, it was really clear that Brad was able to support his arguments a whole lot better. There's logic involved, there's research evidence involved, and all of that was pretty much on our side as far as looking at nutrient timing the way that it needs to be looked at, rather than in an overly reductionist way in this immediate post-exercise window, rather looking at the so-called peri-workout period, or the time period between the pre-exercise meal and the post-exercise meal, and how that affects the anabolic milieu. So yeah, that we've done a bunch of research in that vein. Done a bunch of research in meal frequency. Once again, my area of research is how nutrition affects athletic performance, but mainly how it affects size and strength. And body composition. So we did a bunch of work in that vein. I know you asked me a question like who I am and give your readers a brief introduction and stuff, and I started launching into all this stuff.
It's all good, man. I think one of the main things that people need to understand is that you are the one that's doing the research, and more importantly, you're looking at the research and putting your perspective on it and putting it out to the masses, and that's what your research review is. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of the research review is even, it's pretty dense for me. But a lot of the things you put on your Instagram, a lot of the things you post online, I mean, those are a lot of the conversations we've had at conferences. I mean, those are things that really help coaches, especially, and fighters, because we don't have any time to, do that, right? That's your interest and your passion, and you're good at that. You're good at taking complex scientific studies and kind of, just pointing out the important facts and then getting it to the coaches and getting it to the people, the trainers. You're kind of like a trainer's trainer kind of guy. I am more like a guy that needs to take what you tell me and make it even simpler, like for the real dummies. I'm that guy. I'm practical guy. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of stuff today about MMA, nutrition, about mainly all nutrition. Pretty much that's your wheelhouse. Pretty much all nutrition. And I think it's important to say this, but you've helped me out a lot in my career, and a lot of it, is just by putting out information. And you respond to me when I message you online, and we talk in person. You take your time to help me out, and I really appreciate that. I want to make sure that you know that, and I want to make sure that people out there know that you're a person that would do that for someone like me, who really is just a conference attendee, is just a coach with no name, really. So thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be able to help. It really is.
Yeah, man. So I started off kind of saying, the MMA world or the combat sports world. I have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. I train MMA fighters, and this world is a little different from the fitness world where you come from, um, and the strength conditioning world is another world. But in the combat sports world, I would say if you put nutrition knowledge in the fitness world at like, you know, let's just say we're driving cars, right? That's the example. In the combat sports world, we're riding, we're riding horses. We're pushing each other. There is a lot more misinformation, and more importantly, the experts, the people that are considered experts in the combat sports, MMA, UFC world. Um, I just don't think they know 1% of what you know, and that's to me very obvious when I attend a conference or when I go to an event, and I'm hearing a lot of very complex mechanisms, which to me sounds like word salad.
Mhm.
But nobody can explain to me in simple terms something that should be pretty simple. So I want to get to the bottom of a lot of those things, right? I want to clear up a lot of those things. But what is it that you do now, Alan? I want to just finish up your intro. What do you do on a daily basis? Like I want to know what do you do every day? What do you eat every day? These types of things. What do you eat every day?
Cool. Cool. I do a regular guy trying to maintain a reasonable level of fitness type of thing. Um, it almost couldn't be any more boring. I have to be honest with you. Um, my One of my goals growing up, well, in college and a little bit after that, was to not let the ravages of sedentary life uh, degrade my health and my body composition. So it's more like a self-defense against father time and sitting around a lot for your job. So my sport, if I can put it this way, is kind of like, battling father time. That's my sport right now. And with a wife and two kids, um, that adds extra layers of challenges to that goal of not letting body composition go awry, not letting health go awry. Um, and yeah, what I do daily is maintain a level of moderation that I can manage in terms of training volume, in terms of how I eat. Um, so training is really designed around staying functional and staying strong, but there's nothing competitive or extreme about it. I don't do in quotes, the nightclub workout where you just train chest and biceps and delts and then hit the club, 3 times a week. But yeah, I try to keep a balance with my training, and I
How many
try to
days?
maintain.
How many
How many
days a
days a
week
week?
do you work out?
I train on the low end 3 days a week, and it can go up to 5. So it fluctuates depending on how busy my schedule is. Yeah,
That's pretty
and
good, by the way.
it's
That's
not it's
better
not
than
bad.
me. That's better than me. I as a coach, I mean, I'm sure you know this. You probably were a personal trainer, coach, right? So there's literally no time. Like I'm if I could get in a good jujitsu sparring session, that's rare. So 3 days a week, 5 days a week, that's quite a bit. What about your diet?
Yeah, my diet is very. I mean, it tastes real good. My wife is an amazing cook. Um, my diet is pretty much moderate in terms of the macronutrients. I used to try to get a gram of protein per pound of body weight, but I've been experimenting with seeing what I can get away with in terms of lowering that protein, um, and getting more carbohydrate in there. Just because, carbs are something that have been vilified in the media and for no good basis too. And I've been experimenting with higher carbs, a little bit lower protein, but still keeping protein around 0.7 grams per pound or 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And I found that for my own goals, which are very moderate and very centered around maintenance, I don't have to do the push towards a gram per pound. I don't have to do the sort of things that I would make athletes do. And so,
is that what you would recommend
yeah.
for most athletes? I'm talking specifically of combat sports, jiu-jitsu, MMA, UFC, people that are fighting, judo, wrestling, those types of things. Is that what you would recommend?
Yes, I would recommend right around a gram per pound. There's some research showing the benefits of taking in higher protein while you are dieting or while you're trying to lose weight. So if you're in hypocaloric conditions, then lean mass starts to get threatened to be used as an energy source. So going high on protein during those times, to the order of a gram per pound or even a little bit more, that seems to have a protective effect as well. And it also has an increasing effect on satiety or hunger control. So those are the two kind of big benefits of increasing protein, are that it controls hunger, keeps you fuller longer, and it also protects your lean body mass. So yeah, as far as my nutrition goes, I kind of skirt the lower end of the sweet spot of protein recommendations.
Because you're not doing MMA or jiu-jitsu or any kind of combat,
No.
Just lifting weights.
No, yeah, just lifting weights and trying to run away from father time. So yeah, and trying to chase my kids around, trying to make sure that I can still keep up with them.
How much are you weighing right now?
Right now, I am. Well, you'd never guess it, but I was 173. I vacillate between 172 and 174. And so yeah, I'm not that massive. I want to say I'm 190 and jacked, but yeah, that wouldn't be honest. So.
And so I'm around 200 pounds. If I were to use the 1 gram per pound recommendation, how would I space that? Because that is a lot of protein. How would I space that out? How would you recommend I space that? How many meals?
Oh yeah. The way that you'd want to do that. Well, I would also mention that per the research, you've got kind of a lower end of 0.7 grams per pound. So you can theoretically hit 140 grams of protein as a 200-pound male who's lean, and still be doing a lot of favors in terms of supporting lean body mass, performance, and everything else. So you don't have to necessarily look at 200 as this magic number, but it is an easy number to target, and it does have benefits, especially in dieting scenarios and in scenarios where you're really trying to push or pull all the hypothetical stops towards muscle growth. So let's look at 200 grams. If you were to optimize the intake of that through the day for the goal of, for example, muscle growth, then you would want to split it up into roughly 4 even meals. Roughly. So that would be about 50 grams per meal for 4 meals. And then you're doing 90% of what we know today in sports nutrition to maximize muscle growth and or muscle retention, and performance for that matter.
Would that be for repair too? If you're okay.
Yeah. The way that that it works on that, whatever your protein need is, if every meal that you take in, you design it so that you maximize the acute or the short-term anabolic effect of that meal, then that dose happens to be somewhere between 0.4 to 0.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So it's actually like 0.55 grams per kilogram body weight, but I just round up to 0.6. So that really comes out to be 0.2 to 0.25 grams per pound of body weight per meal. If you want to maximize the anabolic effect of each meal, then your protein dose would be somewhere between 0.2 to 0.25 grams per pound of body weight. And that's how you would do it. And you would want to do a minimum of if your goal is muscle growth, and if your goal, if you just had generally athletic goals, then you would be taken down around 4 meals. You wouldn't want to skirt you wouldn't want to come down to 2 meals a day or 1 meal a day and expect adaptations to be optimized.
Why would it be, let's say I just get the 200 grams in 2 meals. So I get 100 grams in breakfast and I get 100 grams at dinner. Is that going to, what are the benefit would be saving time, but what would be the drawbacks of doing that?
The only real drawback to doing that, Ben, is that if you had a goal of gaining muscle as quickly as possible, then it wouldn't happen.
You're missing the windows of opportunity for
right. You're missing those windows. You're missing you're missing the opportunities to maximize muscle protein synthesis on a short-term basis at various points throughout the day. So the more often you can maximize muscle protein synthesis in a day, then over the long term, the faster that you'll grow.
And what is the timing? Is it like 3 hours? Is it 5 hours? When does that opportunity come about?
Yeah, it depends on the size and the composition of the meal, really. And it gets a little bit tricky here. I mean, there is a limit to how much protein that you can take in a single sitting, that your body will actually use towards muscle growth or muscle protein synthesis. So large meals that are mixed macronutrient meals, protein, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, then the anabolic effect of those meals can last, 5-6 hours, sometimes 7-8 hours, depending on just how slow the protein source is and what that meal is composed of. An easy way to look at it is that meals generally, as far as muscle protein synthesis goes, meals generally have like this 3 to 5 hour effect, depending on the size of the meal, amount of protein. If you took in 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal, then you're pretty much maxing out the anabolic effect of each meal. So that's, speaking in general terms.
So as a fighter, would you recommend that strategy about four meals a day as somebody that's doing combat sports? Because there's also, for muscle protein synthesis, it's not just growth but repair too, right? So
Yep.
So if I wanted to make sure my body was repairing itself at those, optimally, would that also be what you recommend?
Yes, I would recommend that. But I want to throw a little wrinkle in there, saying that if for the general population who's not necessarily concerned with athletic performance and recovery, they can go really low on meal frequency because the body is really resilient and the body can handle a lot of what you throw at it in terms of extremes in low meal frequency. So like if somebody wanted to take down 200 grams of protein in 2 meals and, they didn't have any concerns of muscle growth or optimizing recovery and things like that, then they would be just fine.
I guess the less active or less, people that are training multiple times a day probably need to space out their protein a little better, right? As opposed to people that are mostly sedentary or on a very low output type of lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. The thing is, muscle mass does translate to strength. I mean, indirectly as well as directly, it'll eventually translate to strength. When you lose lean mass, you lose muscle mass, then you'll eventually lose strength. And athletes who have a lot at stake definitely don't want that to happen. you can push extremes with low meal frequency and still hang on to muscle tissue. But if you wanted to optimize things and hedge all your bets in the right direction, then you would have a more even distribution of protein throughout the day through, I would say, a minimum of 3 occasions in the day. So when you start going 4 and up, you're looking at optimal. But for a lot of people in the real world, 3 eating occasions is a little bit more realistic. So
three meals would be all right for the average person, and then you'd say for people that are highly active, fighters, combat sport athletes, go more toward the 4 and above. Okay.
Yeah, especially if there's a lot at stake and it's high level competition, and you want to check off all the boxes of optimality, then that would be one of the boxes that you would check off.
Most of the time when I also coach, regular average Joes too. And, the recommendation I give them is you got to eat less, right? If you're going to lose weight, right? But the second thing, energy balance, right? You cannot eat excess calories and expect that you're going to lose weight. Pretty much that's not a debatable topic. But the second thing I usually tell them is protein, right? Protein is second most important aspect of that equation, which is a macronutrient. Why is protein so high up there? Am I correct, first of all, and why?
Yeah, for sure. Total calories are going to determine your body mass. Energy balance is going to determine body mass, and protein is really going to determine what kind of body mass you gain or lose. So that's why it's so important. Protein is intimately tied to our lean body mass status. So if you don't get protein right, then you can compromise your lean body mass. And really it is kind of all about lean body mass and the function of it, especially when you're talking about health and athletic performance. So yeah, protein is crucial for that. Carbohydrate and fat, they're important. And there's an argument about whether or not carbohydrate is an essential macronutrient. You'll hear people say that carbohydrates are non-essential because your body can make carbohydrates from non-carbohydrate substrates within the body, which is true. However, you have to define essentiality properly. So if you define essentiality as surviving and not dying, then it is true. Your body can make all of the glucose it needs from within the body from non-carbohydrate sources. Even protein can be glucogenic. You can't make a whole lot of carbohydrate out of protein. It's very little, but the body can manufacture carbohydrate and carbohydrate substitutes to just keep functioning and not die if you were to attempt to consume 0 carbohydrates per day. However, the question of are carbohydrates essential for optimizing or maximizing high intensity work output, especially anaerobic work, then the answer to that is yes, they are. Yes, they are essential to maximizing high intensity muscular work.
Is there a minimum that, let's say, a MMA fighter should consume in a day?
That's a great question. And this is a question that has not been investigated systematically. So there haven't been any kind of dose response type of studies on this question. It would be really interesting to see them done.
Is there a threshold they should avoid under, maybe under whatever, 100 grams? Don't go under. Is there any kind of recommendation?
Right. Well, this based on the evidence and based on what we can piece together from these circumstantial bits and pieces, it appears that MMA fighters, combat sports athletes, fall right into the mixed sport category where they're not recreational athletes or just the general population, to where carbohydrate availability doesn't really freaking matter. And they're not in the endurance and ultra endurance realms where performance is compromised without just carbing yourself, to the high heavens. So within those three categories, recreational fitness, and then you've got the mixed sports guys, and then you've got the endurance sports guys. They're right there in the mixed sports realm where the recommendations fall somewhere between 5 to 8 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So that is kind of a wide range, 5 to 8 grams. It's easy enough to look at it like 2 to 3 grams of carbs per pound of body weight. If you were to just kind of simplify it, admittedly, 8 grams per kilogram of body weight is a high amount of carbs. And even, endurance athletes, the recommendation for them, depending on what paper you look at or what position stand you look at, on the low end, it'll be 6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And on the high end, it always tops out at around 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. But then with the position stand of the ISSN, we've got 5 to 8 grams per kilogram of body weight is appropriate for mixed sport athletes. And if we were to simplify that even further, like with pounds, it's like roughly 2 to 3 grams per pound. If you were to look carbohydrates that would optimize performance in mixed sports.
And we're just talking now about, like daily training. You're not cutting weight right now. So we're just, I just want to make sure that's clear. We're not talking about when you're cutting weight, you're on a special diet. We will get to that. But this is just for just regular, you don't have a fight planned, or maybe you're 8 weeks, 12 weeks out from inside your camp. That would be the recommendation: 5 to 8 grams of carbohydrates per kilo, or 2 to 3 grams carbohydrates per pound.
Yeah, that's roughly the neighborhood. Observationally, with mixed sport athletes who go like 3 to 4 grams per kilo, they can still do fine if their training volume isn't very high.
Right.
And some people just kind of inexplicably do better and feel better on lower carb intakes anyway. So I think it's important to allot for those anomalous type of cases and individual differences. Some people just, they feel better on a lower carb amount.
So I want to go back to one thing you said about the protein. So then intermittent fasting probably would not be optimal for like fighters, right? Or muscle gain.
For muscle gain, intermittent fasting is not optimal. And that's because, as we talked about earlier, if you can maximize muscle protein synthesis 4 times in a day, then over time you're going to accrue more muscle growth than if you only had 2 points in the day where muscle protein synthesis was maximized. Right.
So what I'm thinking for fighters is also kind of the same thing, right? They're not necessarily trying to get muscle growth, but they need the repair during those times of repair. So you're missing out on many two opportunities in that situation of repair. So another one would be like so this is not meal frequency, but like something that's hugely popular now is keto, right? Ketogenic diet, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to be, I'm still confused as to what the actual, how many carbs is it? Is it less than 50 grams a day? Is it less than 150? What is it? I don't know. Can you describe keto for me?
Sure. Keto is a restriction of carbohydrate to the point where your body produces ketone bodies. And ketone bodies are an alternate fuel source that your body taps into when the availability of dietary carbohydrates is low. So, and of course, there's the kind of the misconception that if you go keto, then you become a fat-burning machine. That needs to be clarified as well. Yeah, you kind of do become a fat-burning machine, but it's not necessarily body fat that you're using as fuel. It's ingested fat, it's intramuscular fat, it's an increase in circulating fats in the blood. It's not necessarily fat that you're extracting from your subcutaneous space and your
tissue. It's not adipose tissue.
Yeah. From your fat tissue, right? So, so ketogenic dieting is achieved by restricting dietary carbs to about 50 grams or less. And then most of the population will go into ketosis. And there's different degrees of ketosis. You can go into light ketosis if you're at 80 to 100 grams of carbohydrates. But usually the level of ketosis that is promoted by the proponents of ketogenic dieting is achieved by 50 grams or less. And that is ketogenic dieting. There's a lot of speculation around ketogenic dieting. There's a lot of hype and claims around ketogenic dieting. The reason why I call it hype is because it's not necessarily supported by science. There's a lot of hope in ketogenic dieting, and that's why the research continues. And there's a good handful of researchers, legit researchers, who are doing ongoing work with ketogenic dieting. One of them being Jeff Volek, who has been doing stuff in the endurance realm with that. Steve Finney. There's folks in the cancer realm, Dominic D'Agostino. But what they found with ketogenic dieting over and over and over again, and there's other folks too. Louise Burke, she's a big time researcher in the sports nutrition area, and she's recently looked at keto as well. What they find consistently is that with certain activities, the body can withstand ketogenic diets without a significant performance decrease. And what they've also found was in endurance type sports, if the ketogenic diet results in weight loss, then in some cases it can actually increase endurance capacity. And the way that this works is by the ketogenic diet, through one mechanism or another, decreasing the drive to eat, decreasing appetite, and resulting in less total caloric intake on a net basis over time. And so what happens with that is the weight loss, and what happens with that is the increased power to weight ratio, and what happens with that is increased endurance capacity. So that has been observed. But what's also been observed when calories are controlled between the groups is a decrease in exercise performance. And specifically, this decrease in exercise performance has been seen across a range of intensities. It's been seen with race walking, and it's also been seen with higher intensity work like sprinting. The ketogenic diet really, I mean, mechanistically, you're really playing with fire if you think you're going to be highly competitive in combat sports on a ketogenic diet. The combat sports involve a mix of intensities, but there is absolutely an anaerobic component and a high intensity component that's highly glycolytic. And if the availability of carbohydrate isn't there, then performance is going to suffer, and that is the issue. That's the issue with ketogenic dieting.
So you would not recommend a ketogenic diet for a fighter?
No,
that wouldn't be your go-to.
No, it's just a big gamble, and
right.
Chances are greater than not you are going to suboptimize high intensity work output.
Now,
that's just the physiology of it.
How about I'm curious, what kind of endurance? You mentioned endurance sports. Some people could survive on a ketogenic diet and be okay. What about Jiu-Jitsu? I don't consider Jiu-Jitsu a endurance sport, but there's definitely less explosive. Like there's no Superman punch in Jiu-Jitsu. The only explosive components in Jiu-Jitsu really occur like standing when you're doing takedown, a judo throw, something like that. Or maybe when you're passing the guard, something like that. But a lot of it is just isometric hugging and positioning. Yeah. Would a ketogenic diet be better suited for jiu-jitsu or
Yeah, no,
no?
it wouldn't. I mean, those maximal isometric contractions are glycolytic. So they require glucose availability in order for you to prolong that isometric hold. So it's very akin to regular glycolytic high intensity work. Even if you were to just, choke, be squeezing at maximal capacity.
Is there a martial art where keto would be good? Like, what if I'm trying to think of some, but what about man, what is like the most low intense martial art out there?
Tai Chi.
Tai Chi.
Keto,
there we go.
Keto would be amazing for Tai Chi.
That's
by
the
yourself
new,
at the beach.
That's the next info product I'm going to see on the internet. Keto for Tai Chi. It's actually going to make sense. I might have to write that one down actually.
I got a name for it.
What is it?
Tai Cheeto.
There you go. I'm going to have to steal that name too. Oh man, so that's good. I mean, I'm really happy that we kind of said certain things I really wanted to get to, which was intermittent fasting may not be optimal for fighters, probably not optimal, and keto probably not optimal for combat sports athletes because of the reasons you described, right? You're using you're using carbohydrates for high intensity exercise. It's the primary substrate for high intensity exercise, and any explosive movements you're going to be compromised. And not to mention, there's definitely other things that carbohydrates help you with, right? Like brain function. There's other things. Is there anything else other than just performance that you might see some disadvantages of keto specifically?
Not really, dude. Some people do just fine cognitively. Their literature on mood and cognition with macronutrient distribution at the extremes is all pretty much the same. In fact, I mean, there's some pretty interesting work on ketogenic diet and the reduction of symptoms of, or actually the treatment of symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's. So there's
I've
some
heard
really
that I've heard a lot of people say this, that it clears up their brain fog. Keto makes me super productive. They're things that I'm dubious about. But was there any literature on that kind of stuff?
Oh, well, the literature on that mainly looks at the elderly population who's already showing signs and symptoms of dementia.
Oh, okay, there you
And
go.
so, so ketogenic dieting can come in as a potential therapy for that. But still, there's some issues with that research. Like, for example, is it the increase in protein that's doing the magic versus the reduction in carbohydrates? There's some control issues that need to be looked at. It is an interesting body of literature. There's even some literature showing the benefits of medium chain triglycerides on cognition in those populations as well. But yeah, as far as benefits or detriments of carb restriction outside of athletic performance, it really kind of doesn't matter. So you can take everything on an individual basis, an individual preference. If you love high fat, low carb, then by all means stick with that. However, if you want to optimize performance that involves high intensity muscular contraction, and you don't have the carbohydrate available right then and there within the muscle or exogenously, then you're kind of screwed. You can't climb hills. You can't do maximal contraction isometric holds. You can't put the power to the ground with high intensity work output. So you're definitely compromised in that respect. And if we were to take all of the athletes and all the mixed sports that involve high intensity stuff, an extremely small percentage of them will be on a low carbohydrate diet that even closely resembles a ketogenic diet. And that's because they just simply would be forced out of the running, so to speak. They wouldn't be competitive. And the handful of athletes that do well on low carbohydrate dieting or ketogenic dieting are almost never on truly ketogenic programs, especially, during the season. That brings up the whole idea of periodizing carbohydrate and non-linearizing carbohydrate intake. A case can be made if somebody is trying to economize on the amount of calories they take in, then they can restrict carbohydrate on times where it's needed least. So if you're going to engage in some light work, some low intensity stuff, some tempo type work, some, even stuff that would be the equivalent of just jogging or walking or brisk walking, any sort of light activity doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have a major carbohydrate requirement at all. So those would be the times. And on days off from training, if you decide to impose this kind of restriction on your lifestyle, then those would be the days to take in very little carbohydrate if you're economizing on intake.
I asked you this question probably like 4 years ago, actually, and the answer you gave me, I'm not going to forget it because it was so funny. And you said basically, if you're on a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet, your sport or your exercise of choice would probably be like walking to China. would be like it'd be good on the ketogenic diet because there's no output, right?
Right.
I remember
Exactly.
this to this day. So with this might be a question that's more it's definitely outside of my scope, but this is related to keto, and I want to make sure that people hear this and the information gets out there. I've seen some fitness type people just, I believe, irresponsibly share this information, is keto as a way to treat cancer. And my understanding is that there are different types of cancer, and you do not want to just say, all right, I have cancer and I'm going to be on a ketogenic diet and that's what I should do. That's not good. That's not how I'm looking at the research. What do you think about that?
The body of research in that area is definitely not a slam dunk in favor of
Right.
keto dieting in a blanket sense. There is no consensus that if you have cancer, it's time to go keto. Absolutely not. Think about some really basic things as well. It's like the diets that prevent cancer, the ones with all kinds of fruit and vegetable, are far from ketogenic. Right. You have these anti-cancer compounds, anti-cancer potential, and things like fruits, berries, vegetables, all that stuff. If keto was so damn good for cancer, then those foods would probably compromise cancer health, right, or accelerate cancer development. And then that's not true. As you mentioned, there's different types of cancers that respond differently to carbohydrate or not. And it is a very complicated area. There is the potential for keto to work with certain types of cancers, and there's the potential for keto to actually exacerbate states of cancer and actually feed cancer cells.
Yeah, we don't need to go too far into this topic, but I just wanted to make sure that info was out there, and I've seen fitness people share things like, I don't know if they're meta-analysis or just an RCT, but say things like, if I had cancer, then I would be on a ketogenic diet. And these are people with 50,000 Facebook followers. And I just think you got to be careful with this stuff. So just a little irresponsible by certain people in the industry. But, I want to kind of go back to Jiu-Jitsu real quick. It's pretty much been established that high intensity exercise relies on carbohydrates, right? That's the primary substrate. So is there any difference between, say, if I do a box jump, something explosive, I jump up in the air as hard as I can, something explosive, throw a punch, versus isometric squeezing? That would be in jiu-jitsu, right? You do a lot of squeezing. Is that pretty much the same? You're using primarily the same bodies, same substrates to do that? Are they similar?
It's similar but different. See, with combat sports, there can be explosive movements, but they're done repeatedly. They're explosive stuff and or isometric stuff that are done repeatedly, and ultimately it becomes an endurance situation. Exactly. With other events where the explosive stuff happens just very, for a short amount of time or a highly infrequent amount of time, then it's not as much of an endurance situation.
I'm throwing flurry of punches. Flurry of punches would probably not be an endurance thing, right?
Yes, unless you had to do that for 3 rounds or more.
Aiming to knock you out within 10 seconds. If I'm
within
throwing
10 seconds,
flurry of punches, 10 seconds knock you out. That's probably not going to be the same as like if I quickly, jab you a couple times, even though that may even look faster.
Yes. Now here's the thing, the body's energy systems, you've got this continuum, right? You have explosive power on one end, and then you've got endurance, like long-term walk to China type endurance on this end. And so the explosive stuff is fueled by the creatine or the phosphagen system. So the creatine phosphate / ATP system on this side, which is it's actually independent of carbohydrate availability, because the amount of time that this energy system is fueled is very, very short. We're talking less than a minute over here, less than half a minute. And then over here we've got pure endurance, just walking at a very slow pace. All right. If you were to look at the fighting sports, there is this element of the phosphagen system in play. But when that's done over and over and over again, then the requirements start edging this way more towards endurance and mixed sports, and more towards the so-called glycolytic and the oxidative systems.
Right. I'm trying to think of fights that where somebody has come out swinging for the fences and just been completely done in like the next round or even less. I'm thinking there's a couple fights. I know you're an MMA fan, so I think you might know some of these. Do you remember Vitor Belfort against Lyoto Machida? Do you remember that fight?
I have seen it, but I have a better memory of Vitor versus Tank Abbott.
Oh, geez. That fight. I don't even – I only watched the knockout, I think. What about Brock Lesnar and Shane Carwin? Do you remember that fight?
God, I did see it. I just don't remember it.
I'm trying to think of specific examples where that's happened in MMA, and so anyway, that doesn't matter. So there is a difference between
Conor McGregor showed that he was pretty easy to gas out.
Yeah, in his first Diaz.
First
fight.
Diaz, right. Diaz won. Yeah,
definitely punched himself out, or he might have just got hit and just
punched himself out. He looked to have kicked himself out as well with the spinning, the heel kicks and the wheel kicks and.
Was there? So again, I think my question was is there a difference between? Let's make it more specific. Let's say if I throw 10-second flurry of punches and kicks, whatever strikes, aim to knock you out. So I'm going 100%. These are not, these are 100% just throwing. And then I squeeze you. Let's say I squeeze you in an arm triangle for 10 seconds. Are we using the same energy system? Are we
right? That's mostly the extreme end. That's mostly the creatine phosphate / ATP system. That's the phosphagen system that's in play over there. If indeed you're talking about round one coming out, just freaking take the dude out and then choke him out, you could probably do that without the help of significant help of carbohydrate availability. Yeah.
Because I've heard coaches tell me, oh, well, you can do MMA is different from Jiu-Jitsu because there's nothing explosive. But what they're missing out on is the extreme isometric squeezing, which takes a lot of muscular force. It's
and glycogen. It'll deplete glycogen as well. You know,
Right.
it'll use glycogen for
Right.
that, and
So
so
another reason
glycogen,
for carbs, another reason to
right?
ingest carbs.
And for the listener for whom that term is foreign, glycogen is the body's stored form of carbohydrate within the muscle. And of
Right.
course, there's some in the liver as well, but you know, for athletic performance, muscle glycogen availability is crucial.
Right. So let's say combat sports athletes, let's say you're training me, right? Let's say
Hmm?
you're training me, I'm doing jiu-jitsu competition, judo competition, or MMA fight, doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
I'm really just concerned about performance, body composition, health, these things are secondary goals when you're going to get your face punched, right? So
Yeah.
I don't really care about, am I going to live to 60? I'm thinking about, am I going to be uh, punched or submitted, embarrassed in
Hmm?
front of my family and friends? I want the best performance.
Yeah.
Is there any strategy that you would this is a pretty broad question, but is there anything specific that you would do in a diet strategy different than, let's say, somebody who wants to lose weight or gain some muscle? This is for a fighter.
Um, the short answer is no. I mean, if we take you versus like somebody who wants to win a gold medal in like 200 meter or 100-meter sprint, um, it's kind of similar. Uh, you know, there is a power to weight ratio element. So, I mean, you would want to be lean, um, and you would want to have as much strength and power
Which is kind of
as
like
possible.
strange, right? Because if you look at a lot of the legends in MMA, a lot of the champions now,
Yeah.
Daniel Cormier, Daniel Cormier, right?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
should
think
have said
lean.
except for the heavyweight division.
Yes, there's something that happens once you hit heavyweight where leanness like if anybody is 205, right? So light heavyweight and below.
Yeah.
If you have any kind of belly, you're you're going to, you're going to take it all over the internet from people just killing you, right? But somehow once you're heavyweight, you're lean, you could be look like Daniel Cormier, you know, not I would expect everybody to look like Brock Lesnar, but that's just not the case. And Fedor is another example.
Oh
Fedor
yeah. Yep.
extremely goober looking, but just the greatest heavyweight of all time. Daniel
Roy
Cormier is the
Nelson.
best example. Roy
Roy Nelson.
Nelson, he's not a guy that's known to gas either. So I guess
Yeah.
you know
I agree with you there, man. There is an element there.
what's
Like
going on
at
here?
that
Do you have
heavier
any
weight classes,
idea
it's like,
what's going
woo,
on here?
there's some epic stuff going on there, man. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought, but I mean, you can try to imagine, could these guys do better?
Yes,
If they
I
were
always
just
think
if they were
that.
to switch out that fat for muscle, and the answer is probably. But you look at what Danny Cormier did at his most recent fight against Stipe, I believe it was,
He
or did he
fought
just?
Derek Lewis after, but he beat
He
Stipe
Yeah,
before
Derek
that.
Lewis, right? He did
Yeah.
Derek Lewis as well. Oh my God, homie was like on full donut mode, and he
Oh yeah.
killed it. He killed it, man. So yeah, I think there's something going on there. There's certain exceptions to
I
the rule.
my
There's maybe some
personal
way that you can launch shots. I don't know if you get that
my personal
if that
opinion
belly ripple goes into it enough perfectly, then you could just bam. There's something going on there.
my personal opinion is that the skill gap is just so large in the heavyweight division that people can overcome, you know, those things, right? Like if Daniel was super ripped and he'd probably fight at like 185 actually, but anyway, I think his skill level is so high that it doesn't matter. Plus the extra weight has some kind of benefit that we haven't figured out what it is, um,
When he
but
gets on
yeah,
top of you, for sure, right?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Roy Nelson's crucifix probably is I might tap just from him being there. So the, so you're saying if you're training me and I'm a fighter and there's really no difference in is there I guess what I'm trying to tease out of you is, are there any secrets? Is there a magic food? Is there some kind of Brazilian kale that's out there that if I eat this thing, my performance is going to go up. Is there any magic out there? Is there any secrets you can share with us?
No. Diets, secrets? No. Definitely not. I see a lot of athletes in all sports, including combat sports. Just the problem is undercarbing. The problem is gassing out. The guys who have just a naturally greater endurance capacity will be able to get away with undercarbing. But everybody else who's a mere mortal better be fully fueled for the activity.
I guess that's the other side of the question, right? Is there any areas of opportunity that fighters, combat sport athletes are missing that could be filled in and improve performance that way? So as opposed to, is there anything there other than carbing up?
Well, definitely carbing up. There was a recent study that came out that looked at the effect of dehydration from the weight cut, how it affects performance 24 hours later. And this was, I believe, the first study to look at a performance 24 hours after the weight cut versus previous studies, which had this habit of looking at weight cuts 48 hours after the fact. But some organizations now do their, they have a lot shorter window from the way into the competition. So the athletes, as a result of losing almost 5% of their total body weight, their grip strength was still decreased 24 hours later, and their medicine ball throw distance was decreased as well.
So they decreased 5% of their body weight.
Yes.
And then they did these tests. Did they weigh
well, they
in?
they rehydrated.
They rehydrated. Okay.
And then they did the test. They were still their performance was still down 24 hours afterwards. And we're talking, grip strength and medicine ball throw, so explosive stuff as well as isometric hold stuff that attempted to mimic the tasks in combat. So it's a performance compromise for sure. If the weight cut is severe enough and the rehydration process is not complete.
Yeah, so I do weight cuts for fighters, boxers, jiu-jitsu guys. I've had successful ones. I've had ones that, were I don't know what happened. Certain people weren't listening, or maybe I wasn't on top of things. But let's get into that, because that I think is really important. That's something that, if there was one thing on planet Earth that I may have a little more experience than you, that might be the one thing. But
I'm certain it is.
Doubtful. There's probably still many things that you could teach me about it. But so anyway, I do weight cuts for fighters. And there's basically like a system that I follow, and I know what it does and kind of what it would, but a lot of the audience might not, and I think that you would be 10 times more eloquent in adding your perspective and describing these mechanisms than me. So I'm just going to ask you kind of, what's going on here, and why this is happening. So let me just describe to you the things I do quickly. So about 5 days out, I'm going to have my fighters do a couple checklist things. Okay. The first one is fiber. I think this is one of the easiest things to eliminate from the diet for a really quick drop in weight. And I usually start off having my fighters eat canned vegetables with very little fiber, taking that out by day 3, and then just going no fiber. Why is it that fiber, the drop of fiber, will cause a short-term weight loss? And is there any dangers in doing that in the short term?
There's no dangers in doing that I can think of. There certain fibers, there's different types of fibers. There's insoluble fibers, soluble fibers, and then they've kind of further classified them into fermentable fibers versus non-fermentable fibers. So it gets a little bit complicated, but the net, the net point is that fiber can be a water retentive thing. And typically with fiber, you've got metabolizable or usable carbohydrate within the fiber source as well. So when you're cutting fiber out, then you'll also have a tendency to cut out or cut down carbohydrate as well. And with you doing this,
do you mean reduce, like you will not absorb it, or what do you mean by?
Yeah, you're taking in less carbohydrate. So for example, if you were to cut out a fiber containing food, let's say, then the carbohydrate or the usable carbohydrate and the non-fiber carbohydrates along with that food would get reduced or eliminated as well.
Got it.
So I'm not totally aware of your protocol, but I'm imagining that certain types of high fiber carbohydrate foods would be eliminated during that time.
Yes. I mean, there's literally no, I tell my guys, at best you're eating canned vegetables, which have, very low fiber, and we're staying away from, nut butters, seeds, nuts, pretty much. People have criticized me for doing this, but I have a lot of my fighters eat like a Hershey's bar, a Hershey's milk chocolate during the weight cut week, because zero fiber, high energy, high fat, very low weight. So we're not stuffing the body with 4 pounds of broccoli and chicken breast or something. It's not steamed, so there's no water in it. So but yeah, so pretty much with fiber, it's water retentive, and it causes you to kind of reduce your calories, I guess, by not absorbing certain carbohydrates that have high fiber.
That's right. I mean, if you were to increase fiber in the diet, then that's been reliably shown to decrease the amount of calories that your body is able to absorb and use. So your body has less, in quotes, metabolizable energy on a high fiber diet versus a low fiber diet. I can see a lot of people kind of getting mad at you for cutting fiber, like during a weight cut. Why is he doing that? But what's kind of an interesting thing with dietary fiber, I think it's overhyped. There is a body of literature showing that, at least in theory, that a certain amount of fiber can be healthy for the microbiome, for the gut, in quotes, gut health. However, some people take this kind of to an extreme, and if you'll notice with your athletes or with your clients in general, when you have them increase dietary fiber, especially if it's not a gradual increase, and especially if it's a substantial increase, they'll experience a lot of gastrointestinal upset and gas and all kinds of gnarly things going on. Whereas when you have people cut fiber out, then all of the sort of gastrointestinal upset sort of disappears, and everything is just kind of cool.
Now, are you speaking of farting here, or are we talking about something else? Because I have a problem with that, actually, so I might have to decrease my fiber.
Yes, that would be the main issue, the Dutch oven effect. So yes.
Okay, so that's one of the things, right? Fiber reduce, and I usually see I've had heavyweight fighters lose like almost 5 pounds, I think, of just reducing fiber, and the second thing, I mean, it does not really a checklist, but just these are all specific things. They're not in order. I mean, the other thing I do is I have them restrict basically down to a ketogenic diet, the 5 days out. So I'll have them ingest 50 grams of carbs, usually right in that range. And again, it helps with the weight loss. Can you describe what's happening here?
Yeah, that's exactly the strategy that you would want to employ. For weight cutting, you got 3 macronutrients to work with in terms of calorie reduction. All right, you're not going to want to cut protein down, because then you're compromising the body's ability to preserve lean body mass. You're not going to want to cut fat down to, or out to critical levels. I mean, arguably, you can go pretty dang low fat, but with carbohydrate being the most expendable substrate, and also you've already built all of the skill set and you've already done the work with the athlete to the point where, once you reintroduce the carbohydrate, they'll have all that capacity back.
Right. So this is important to note too, is that we're talking now about the weight cut. So this is, you need to get to a certain weight. We're not doing skill training. Most fighters on the week of the fight do media. They'll have light sweat sessions, maybe some light grappling. There is no heavy strength training or heavy sparring days usually ever during the week of the fight. So now we just talked about how important carbohydrates are. We're now talking about decreasing them during the week. It's very specific.
For the weight cut. Yeah, that's exactly the right thing to do, is to cut carbohydrate. Now what some folks kind of do mistakenly is they'll replace all those carbohydrate calories with fat calories. And that is a bum kind of move, and you're potentially compromising performance in a very kind of odd regard. Is what there have been a number of experiments done in this area. Haveman did it, Stellingwerf, I believe, did it as well, where they do a fat load for a week. So they reduce carbohydrate, increase dietary fat. And what that did within the week's time period was impair the body's ability to break down glycogen when the high carb diet was reintroduced. So that's a bad thing for performance. So while you are cutting carbohydrate down for the weight cut, yes, that's good. What you wouldn't want to do is kick up the fat while you're doing that, because then
is there a threshold? Is there? So that's actually new to me. So is there an amount that, because if you're cutting out carbohydrates to that low, a certain amount of fat is going to have to go up, right? I mean, or are you saying that we should replace the decreased carbohydrates with protein only?
Well, you wouldn't replace the decrease in carbohydrates. You wouldn't have to replace it with anything.
You would just be on a deficit.
You'd be at a deficit, yeah. You'd be at a deficit. And that would encourage more rapid weight loss. And the weight loss would be more efficient. And you wouldn't necessarily have to go down to extremely low carbohydrate levels. You keep it pretty moderate anyway. I mean, 50 grams of carbohydrates is, that's nothing. That's not anywhere near kind of like a panic type of
I'm pretty
range.
Curious about that study. So you said there was a study that came out that if you did a fat load, it would impair your body's ability to utilize, was it glycogen?
Yeah,
glucose?
yeah. What happened was they put the athletes on a high-fat, low-carb diet for a week, and what happened was they tested sprinting capability after the carb load, the reintroduction on the seventh day, and sprinting capability went down as a result of the fat loading, and they investigated like what could possibly be the mechanism of this stuff. So apparently, during periods of high fat intake, the body adjusts or adapts by getting much better at using fat and not as good at using carbohydrate. And this is sort of a enzymatically regulated thing where an enzyme that we've got that breaks down glycogen is called pyruvate dehydrogenase. The activity of that enzyme goes down pretty rapidly within a week of high fat intake. And it's just the body adapting to the types of fuels that we're giving it. And the problem with the body being better at using fat for fuel is that it becomes less good at using carbohydrate for fuel. And the problem with using fat for fuel is that it's 2 to 5 times slower a fuel source.
And this change can happen in a week.
In a week, yeah.
That's
in a
fast.
Week. Right. So you wouldn't want to, put an athlete on a ketogenic diet and load them up with fat.
Right.
Like, like prior to a competition. That's sort of playing with fire a little bit. So yeah, that and once again, I'm sure people have done that, and I'm sure fighters have done just fine, right? Because a lot of it is a skill aspect rather than a nutritional aspect. But in terms of just optimizing the theoretical aspects, it's just not a good idea.
Right. And that's something that I'm going to have to go back and kind of tweak a little bit. In the recent camps that I've done, I've been doing exactly what you said, which is just not replace the room that I would have taken out for the carbs. But definitely, a couple of years ago, I was very big on just keeping the maintenance calories. So I think I had a lot of success even with that, probably because the fighters that I was coaching through these weight cuts, they came into the fight with such a massive weight advantage that they kind of just they powered through. But
Cool.
you'd be surprised, a lot of the athletes that I do with weight cuts, and I ask them, what do you do? And a lot of them, it's just I starve for the week and I don't eat. And this is this is not good.
And a lot of them still do okay just because of their skill level.
Yeah, one of my so Mickey Gall is one of the guys that I do weight cuts for, and I strength conditioning for, and I just remember doing the weight cut for him, and he went into the octagon at I believe 200 pounds, and he was 170, weighing in at 170 or 171, something like that, and he had told me in the past he'd never gotten back up to like more than 180-ish, maybe 180 exact, somewhere in that range. So for him to have like almost 20 more pounds than he normally had was probably such a massive advantage that it didn't, a little underutilization of carbs may not matter at this point, but definitely I'm going to take that into account. That's big. So I actually made a joke. I need to take this joke back now. Is that the only acceptable time to drink a bulletproof coffee would be during the week of a weight cut?
Well, here's the thing, dude. And this is a little wrinkle I want to throw in too that deserves some mention. Ketogenic dieting reduces appetite. So it can actually potentially make it easier and increase compliance to the diet if you can achieve elevated ketone levels to a higher degree than if you had just reduced the carbohydrate, not replace it with fat.
So there could be does that take to kick in?
To kick into ketosis, or for it to max out. Maximal levels of blood ketones occur within 2-ish weeks. With some literature, it occurs within a week. So 1 to 2 weeks of ketogenic dieting, you are going to max out blood ketone levels. But then again, this stuff, and you're talking about Mickey. And by the way, do I have it right that Mickey Gall was the guy who did in CM Punk?
Oh yeah,
I think that was the first fight I saw of Mickey Gall. I was like, oh wait, no, it was the second fight I saw of his. And then when I saw him then put him in there with CM Punk, I was like, oh man,
that was a joke.
That was an easy night for him. But yeah, attaining maximal levels of ketones can occur within a week.
And just to make it, shout out to Mickey Gall, by the way. Just to make it clear, Mickey's jiu-jitsu is on another level. Like what he did to CM Punk, he can do to me. Like I can maybe hang with him for 3 rounds of jiu-jitsu sparring, then after that it's just him killing me. So and I'm a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. I kill CM Punk. I guarantee I kill CM Punk, but he killed me. So it's no disrespect to CM Punk. He's a good guy, and I really respect that he went in there. He went in there again. And he lost again. And I think that'll be it for him. But yeah, that second thing, the carbohydrates, that's super important. I keep that in my mind. Is don't don't replace it with fat.
Because you don't have to,
right.
A lot of it is a hydration thing. It's not necessarily a thing where you need to keep total calories up at a certain level, especially not when the demand for calories is nearly as high as it was during training leading up to it.
Yep,
You know,
absolutely, absolutely. That's a
yeah,
great
yeah, you can be much
perspective.
more efficient.
So that was the first two things was fiber and carb restriction.
Yeah,
This is something that I also do, but I put less of an emphasis on it, which is sodium restriction. Now I've had fighters who I've restricted sodium and their body just doesn't respond. They doesn't matter. And then I've had fighters restrict sodium and they do lose weight. They lose a couple pounds. What's going on there? What is it with sodium and I guess water retention? What's the mechanism there?
yeah. There's a few schools of thought on this, and the reason why you've seen nothing really terribly consistent with this is because the body regulates its water status pretty tightly. It regulates some electrolyte status pretty tightly. So if you were to severely cut sodium, then the body will raise its hormonal levels of the water retentive mechanism. So aldosterone will go up in order to allow the body to retain water and sodium as you try to cut it. And this is some very tightly regulated stuff, and because there is a degree of inter-individual variability, some people will respond very robustly to sodium cuts, and some won't. And I think that it almost has to be looked at on an individual basis, because I think it's a dice roll for everybody. What you do with sodium. Because some people just have, a lot tighter regulation of these
Yeah.
sort of aspects.
So there with that sodium, it's an
Hmm.
electrolyte. With that also comes this. How about other electrolytes? Do they also have a role in retention of water? What about potassium,
Yeah,
magnesium, things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that?
Yes, potassium functions oppositely to sodium, and at a very simplistic level, you can think of sodium as the water retentive, the water retentive element, and then potassium as the diuresis type of element, or the water loss type of element. And what happens a lot of times is when people restrict sodium and increase potassium, then you see water loss. Sometimes you can keep sodium stable and you can just increase potassium and then you see water loss. Probably the area of research that this has been measured most consistently is research on people with high blood pressure. So people with hypertension, when there's an increase in dietary potassium or even supplemental potassium, then their blood pressure will go down. And so I've seen it in weight cutting and with combat sports and with any sport that involves a weight class. When people restrict sodium and increase potassium, then there is going to be some water drops. But you know what? That's all theory, Ben.
So
Because
should I load up on that week? Should I just overdo the potassium then? Is that something to try?
well, there's something called hyperkalemia that can compromise cardiac health with overdosing
Potassium.
potassium levels. So if you're going to experiment with that, then you would want to do it with food
Right.
instead of with
It's
potassium
pills.
supplements.
So that
Yeah.
was that was one issue that I have run into that I have come up with some creative ways to solve, but I want to hear your take on it. Is during the week of the weight cut, almost always, uh, this happens especially with boxers for some reason, is that they're going to get leg cramping. Um,
Mhm.
is there something that can be done to, you know, what is the mechanism there? Is it just loss of electrolytes? Is it loss of
Right.
water? What can be done there? Everybody's cramping.
Yeah, yeah. It's a general reduction in electrolyte levels. what's been really odd and really strange, I mean, you would think, I mean, the older model of getting rid of cramping was to eat bananas to get the potassium levels up. But what works better than that, and what actually kind of works counter to weight cutting, unfortunately, is drinking pickle juice. So I learned this from one of my dietitian friends who works with a range of athletes, and she's done the pickle juice thing, and it works consistently for her. So I thought I'd pass that on to you.
What is special about pickle juice?
Well, the sodium content possibly, and possibly some other stuff that we don't know. Maybe some special pickle magic. But yeah, pickle juice seems to get rid of cramping, man. But unfortunately, like I said, it's
got high sodium.
It's counterproductive to drops.
What about increasing the electrolytes that may not help with the water retention, like magnesium, like potassium? Would that be beneficial to kind of mitigate the cramping? Is there Epsom salt bath?
In theory, it should be, man. In theory, it should be. Magnesium is an underconsumed mineral for general health in the general population anyway. Magnesium is actually something that, if you look at the requirements for just general health, nobody's meeting it. Like only 2% of the general population is getting the 4,700 milligrams of magnesium per day that's recommended. That's a lot of freaking magnesium that's being recommended. And so certainly athletes and competitive athletes stand a very high chance of not getting enough magnesium. So right. I mean myself, just being OCD, I supplement with magnesium.
And as far as you know, there's no detriments to a weight cut,
right?
To ingest magnesium and potassium.
That's correct. So magnesium and potassium would be two good candidates. And another reason why magnesium would be a good candidate because it functions to, in a way, relax muscles in an odd way. So that would kind of counteract the muscle contraction aspect of stuff and the cramping aspect of stuff. So magnesium has actually been used to treat a condition called restless legs syndrome. So it happens while people sleep. So pre-bed magnesium has been used to counteract the overexcitability of the neurological system and within muscle as well. So there's some potential there for magnesium to counteract cramping. But then again, that's just me speculating.
Okay, good. I mean, these are things that kind of fall in line with what I've been doing. I have, during the week of the weight cut, I have the fighters, the athletes, supplement with magnesium, potassium, calcium, and zinc. And those are, who knows if they're doing a ton, but that's definitely, that combination has been helping with cramping. And some of it, I'm replacing the zinc because of the sweat loss, the excessive sweat loss, where they're sweating all the time. I have them, sweat even just basically for fun every day, just to get the body used to sweating.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, that's really good to know. It's good to know that magnesium and potassium do not make the body retain water, because I had suspicions that they may, but you're telling me otherwise. So that's good.
No.
That's good.
Yep. With potassium, it would pretty much be the opposite. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a major problem. I mean, during the weight cut, especially with guys that I train that are doing 20-pound, I usually recommend 10% to be 10% above your weight class, about 5 days out from the weigh-in, and we can usually come back from that, rehydrate, replenish, refuel, and be okay. Anything greater than that, we can do it, but your performance is going to really tank. And all this, by the way, all my weight cutting information is all from Dr. Reed Reel. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's a sports scientist. Not sure where he's based out of, but he works for Gatorade. And he's the one that kind of put all this together for me. And this weight cutting stuff is just like, You'd be surprised, man. You'd be surprised. I attended a conference recently, and man, went there to learn about weight cuts, and one of the top coaches in nutrition in the MMA world gave me about a 50-minute lecture on motivation and about a 30-second talk about how he actually does the weight cut. So this is this is what we're dealing with in the combat sports world, is just this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, you know what you mentioned in one of our other conversations, that weight cutting in combat sports is like the wild, wild west.
Yep.
Where there are a dozen different approaches. There's no scientific consensus. And I think a lot of it is because of the combination of the fact that there has not been a lot of research done on this. Certainly not any research done on what might optimize this process while preserving performance,
Right.
And of course there's the influence of people who have a bro science type of mindset where they believe more in magic rather than science. And, they're not really concerned with an evidence-based type of approach.
It worked for me, and it worked for my wrestling coach. So I'm going to dump green alcohol into the bathtub and sit there for 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's that's why I'm bringing you into the combat sports world, Alan. I think if there was research done, it would change a lot. And to me, it doesn't make any sense, because people are doing all this research on nutrition, hypertrophy, muscle gain and stuff, and that's great, right? That's great, hits the masses, whatever, awesome. But there's no research on how to properly weight cut, and this is not just for performance, but your health is on the line. Like you could potentially die from a weight cut. People have died, and then there's people doing it completely wrong. So that's just one area that I'm trying to just get done right. And and I mean when I say a lot of the top weight cutting coaches out there have no idea what they're doing. They're heading in the general direction, and they're getting the fighters to the weight, but a lot of it's suboptimal, dangerous. And the only reason I don't call these people out by name is because I think they're nice guys, and their intent is good. They're trying to do their best. It's just they're misinformed, and I will always look at intent first, as opposed to they're not snake oil salesmen. They're just misinformed. So I'm trying to get this info out there. The last component of the weight cut that I usually have my guys do is a water load. So to those of you guys that aren't familiar with a water load, what it is it's about 5 or so days. My exact protocol is to have 4 days. Is it 4 or 5 days? I don't remember. I have it written down. 4 or 5 days of super loading water, basically. So there's a formula, but I would, for a 200 pounder, I would drink probably over 2 gallons, maybe 2.5 gallons of water per day. And then at the day before the weigh-in, not the day of the weigh-in, the day before the weigh-in, there's going to be a sharp drop in water intake to, for me, probably around 32 ounces of water. And then that day, you don't have anything more than 32 ounces of fluids. The next day, you don't drink any water, and then you do your weigh-in. That's also the day where all of my dehydration techniques come in. We go in the hot tub. I really only recommend the hot tub or putting on layers and doing shadow boxing and losing weight through a passive or active dehydration method. I just don't like the sauna. I don't know what it is, but every time I put a guy in the sauna, they've come out worse. But every time I put somebody in the hot tub, they don't feel great, but they're doing a little better. There's some mechanism there. But my question to you is, what is going on with the water load? Why does a water load work? Do we have any evidence as to how it works?
This would be all speculation, man. That they're just observationally with the bodybuilding world, some of the guys who've done really well have actually been loading with water while the other guys were cutting it. And so the whole idea would be to get your body in a mode where it is actively accelerating its water excreting faculties. And so when you cut that off, that mode is still switched on, and then your body is continuing to diurese. How that's happening and what exactly is happening with that, I couldn't tell you. It would be all speculative anyway. I mean, there would be a presumed reduction in things like aldosterone. And also, there always is that element of, if we were to put two groups and run them parallel and have one group water load and one group not, then there might be less of a difference than we expect. Just sort of, but see, with your experience, only you would know that with your experience. Have you tried the water load versus not the water load in the same athlete, and what sort of differences have you seen?
My experiences have been that it generally works, but it works far better with all the other elements in place. It does not work very well when I just tell somebody, hey, let's just do a water load this week and let's see what happens. They'll lose like 2 pounds, maybe, sometimes 0. But then if I do it with the rest of the protocols, then it's a different story. What I do notice with the water load is it helps people sweat more. It's just that's just, I mean, the body just probably wants to get rid of that water because it's in the body. I'm not sure how scientific that is, but that's what I've noticed is, as like for somebody like me, if I drink 2 gallons a day, I'm sweating like a pig. And I'm somebody that doesn't sweat much. So as far as the water load goes, what I usually chalk it up to is just that we know it works. We don't know how well it works, but it works. So we should probably do it. That, I believe, is where a lot of the cramping issues is coming from, is the pissing out of the electrolytes. Would you agree? Would you agree with that?
There could be a degree of mild hyponatremia, which is a lowered concentration of electrolyte levels in circulation that could contribute to cramping. That could be an issue. I wanted to mention that one of the mechanisms by which the water loading phase that you do might work for weight reduction is a displacement of caloric intake. So in the general population, when people do a water preload before a meal, that can be anywhere roughly up to 500 mLs or a couple cups of water. Within 30 minutes or so of a meal, there has been a spontaneous reduction in caloric intake of that meal following the water preload. And that spontaneous reduction has ranged anywhere from like in the 70-ish calories all the way up to the 140-ish calories that the person in the experiment just automatically or just ad lib eats less calories when there's water involved prior to the intake of that. Right. So if you're talking about 2 gallons of water a day beyond what they normally take in, I'm seeing a fair amount of default caloric intake reduction as well. So, when you cut off that water intake and leave enough room for the weigh-in, I'm seeing another potential mechanism in there where they would have taken significantly less calories over the 5-day water load versus if they didn't do the water load. So that might be another thing to consider too.
Got it. Okay, that's great. That's great perspective on that. I never thought about that, because that is also something that I recommend to people just looking to lose weight is to drink that 12 ounces, 16 ounces of water right before a meal. Now, I want to be respectful of your time, but are you good on time?
Good. I'm good.
Good.
Man.
Okay, because I got more questions.
Sure.
So with the last thing with the weight cut, I guess, would be hold on a second. I had a good question here.
Hopefully I have a good answer to it. I
I guess is there anything that in the protocol that I gave you that you would add to? Is there anything that you think that could be done better? Is there anything that you would do personally to help a fighter cut weight differently?
I just wouldn't replace the carb cuts with fat.
Hmm.
That's the main freaking thing. Depending on how you mentioned calcium supplementation,
Hmm.
the calcium losses are somewhat minimal. I mean, they do help with muscle contraction, but if you are now in the same sense that sodium and potassium kind of have these opposite functions, magnesium and calcium sort of are almost a mirror to that.
They cancel each other
So
out.
they don't necessarily cancel each other out, but magnesium more helps muscles relax, whereas calcium more helps muscles contract. So if you're seeing issues with cramping in your fighters, then you might want to take a look at how much calcium that you're having them supplement with, and then consider reducing it. So those would be the two things that kind of stand out with me as far as that goes. And the other thing is, the water loading thing, that's really an experience-based thing. And if you've seen great results with it, then that's awesome. I've heard of all kinds of water loading and water restricting things happen all over the map. So I can't really say, what a kind of like evidence-based scientific consensus type of statement is on water loading. So I would just, just those couple things that stood out to me that you might want to take a look at.
Was there anything that you would add? Is there any other protocol that you think might improve it, or anything like that?
Try, something you can try, and this
Supplements.
Yeah. I would just make sure their micronutrition is in order. I would just make sure that there is a potential thing that you could try. Like creatine has been known to cause water retention, but it's intramuscular water retention. And I think that maybe last minute changes in the creatine protocol probably wouldn't make much difference. Like, for example, if you were to cut creatine out during the weight cutting process, I'm not sure how much that would help. But who knows?
I did see one thing where one of the coaches that also does weight cutting was adding a tremendous amount of creatine after the weigh-in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any? Do you think there's any benefit to doing that? I mean, he was adding a lot. Like I'm talking probably 30 grams for that one day, those 2 days, a day per day. So
I can see that being helpful if they were not on creatine during the training leading up to the fight. But if you're talking about like a few days of not taking creatine, it takes roughly a month for your body to return to pre-creatine supplementing levels. For being off creatine supplementation completely, it takes about a month for you to return to baseline. So I don't see the need to institute a full-on creatine loading phase at the rehydration phase.
What would you do? What would you do for the rehydration? Would you just do like 5 grams per day, the 2 days after?
I would do 5 to 10 grams a day. There's some data showing that some athletes with a larger degree of muscle mass, a larger degree of lean mass, can benefit from up to 10 grams a day compared to the normal 5-day maintenance. So yeah, that's what I would do with creatine.
Got it. I'm pretty sure this example was my fighter. Something happened, and I told him that more than likely his scale was wrong, or he stepped on a soft surface or something to weigh himself. But I recently had a fighter tell me that he made the weight. He was supposed to make, I think it was 147, and then he took a shower, and then he put on 3 pounds, and he woke up and he was 150. And I said that I don't I'm not sure if that's possible unless you drank some of that water or it, went in your ass or something. I don't know. But what do you think happened there?
Oh God. I don't know, man. I've only experienced that after eating a sushi lunch.
Yeah, that's
So
not how the body works, right? Like you cannot,
yeah, no,
your skin cannot suck in water, as far as
no, no,
I know. So
no. I
anyway,
think that could have been an instrument error type of
yeah,
thing.
I'm pretty sure it was an instrument error.
Yeah, yeah.
So just to be clear, your body, the only way for your body to take in water would be through your mouth and your anus, correct?
It would be kind of tough for it to go in through anywhere but your mouth, unless you really, really try. But yeah, that's right.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So yeah. All right. I guess that pretty much covered for weight cutting. I think I, I'm really happy it cleared up a lot of things just for me personally as well. And I hope, people that are listening to this are learning some things, because I mean, there's huge knowledge just from what we talked about in the last 10 minutes. All right. There was one thing, do you know who Tyson Fury is?
Yeah, God, you know what? I should.
Heavyweight boxer. He's fighting, Deontay Wilder on
Okay, yeah,
December
yeah, yeah.
1st.
Yes, yes,
So
yes. Okay, yep.
he was a guy who he beat Klitschko, right? He beat Klitschko in a heavyweight title match. He beat him, took the belt, sang this weird song, and then he had some personal issues. He had I think some mental disorders or depression. Something happened, not good, and he ballooned up to about 400 pounds, I believe is what they said. Um, and then he's back. He has cut himself back down to 250. So I I have heard this. All right, I've heard this from certain coaches, and I'm not sure if this is true. I want to hear your take on it, but um, certain coaches have said that if you balloon up to obesity range, like
Yeah,
400 pounds, I mean the
yeah.
guy's big, so 400 for him might not be that obese, but it's bad. So let's say me, right? I'm 5'9" and I'm 200. Let's say I
Hmm.
go up to 400 pounds, and then
Yeah.
I come back down to 180. Okay,
Hmm.
what kind of metabolic, I think I'm using like a Lane Norton term here. Is there any metabolic damage? Is there any something can happen to me in that span that's negative? Am I going to increase my fat cell count? What's going to happen? Is there something bad that's going to happen here?
Yeah, that's a good question, man.
Fighters do this all the
Yeah,
time, by the way,
yeah,
all the
yeah,
time.
yeah. Metabolic damage or metabolic adaptation. Well, okay. In the physique sport world, there is kind of this legend that if you diet, you can end up slowing your metabolism down to kind of these terminal levels to where you're only taking in like 1,000 calories a day, and you're doing a ton of ton of cardio, and you're still holding on to weight. Those are the way that translates to combat sports with these extreme stuff, like you talked about Tyson Fury. And by the way, if he's going to fight Deontay Wilder, Deontay is invincible, right? So he's in trouble, right? or is Tyson Fury going to get him?
I don't know. This is going to be the fight of the century. But I would say that this is one of the reasons I'm asking you this question is Tyson going to be compromised in any way by doing, because this can't be good, right? You can't be going up to that and then
Yeah.
coming back down.
Well, yeah. Like, here's the thing, dude. Metabolic damage. It's an imaginary concept, really. Um, you can go up to 300, 400 pounds, and then diet back down. And as long as you abandoned all of the habits and the protocol that it took to maintain 400 pounds, then your body will come back to where it was metabolically. You know, all of the research that shows metabolic slowing has been on morbidly obese subjects who were involved in the Biggest Loser competition. And so with the Biggest Loser competition, what they did was anywhere from like 6 to 9 hours a day of just endless cardio, and anywhere from 400 to 800 calories that they consume per day in addition to that. So they put themselves through extreme starvation and extreme amounts of exercise. And you can't do high intensity exercise all day. So it's got to be lower intensity so you can sustain it. But they really maxed that out. Under those circumstances, there can be some really kind of extenuating phenomena that happen. And I don't think it translates to the population that you brought up. I don't think it would translate to what Tyson Fury did. I don't think it would translate to almost what anybody would do.
You should expect no lasting issues.
No, I don't think so. Unless he got that weight, unless he got like 100 pounds off in like 3 months.
Right. Is there possible benefits? Do you retain some of the power? Is there weight? I don't know. Is there benefits?
No, not necessarily. I mean, as long as he didn't lose more lean, as long as where he returns to is not a state of having a lot less lean body mass than he used to have, then he should be just fine. So, the problems with weight cycling or yo-yo dieting are largely a psychological issue. So when people gain a whole lot of weight and then lose it, then it can have psychological effects that make it tougher for them to maintain healthy body weights. Right. So it's not really a physiological thing. It's not really this permanent change in your physiology as far as metabolism goes. The evidence just isn't there, with rare exception of like the Biggest Loser contestants who a lot of that has been self-reported stuff as well too. So I think that's kind of an imaginary boogeyman that people are making a mountain out of a molehill of.
Now I'm going to say something else that Lane said that I'm just, again, not sure of, but it's more nuanced than that. It would be for, let's say you had somebody who was morbidly obese, 400 pounds, that was not athletic, and they wanted to be a physique competitor. Do you think that they could get to the leanness of, let's say, 7 or 8% body fat? Because something that Lane has said is that you if you ever balloon up to that weight, I don't want to misquote him, but you're adding fat cells to your body. You're enlarging your fat cells. I'm not really sure what's happening here, and that you would never be able to go back down in weight and maintain a leanness because of, that's what he's describing, I believe, as some kind of metabolic damage or some kind of damage to the body. Is there any truth in that?
Yeah, the question of fat cells is interesting. I looked at it just pretty recently, and what happens is really pretty strange. And there has always been this debate of, do fat cells increase in number or do they increase in size when you're putting on body fat? And they've seen fat cells increase in number, which is called hyperplasia, versus increasing in size, which is called hypertrophy. And they've seen this in animals. But they weren't sure whether this happened in humans. So in 2010, there was a human study that was done where they overfed subjects for an 8-week period, enough for them to gain, I believe it was 1.6 kilograms of body weight in an 8-week period. And so it wasn't a whole lot of weight gain, but what they saw was an increase in fat cell size in the upper body, in the abdominal area, and they saw an increase in fat cell number at the femoral area, at the legs. So there's something odd going on with fat cell hyperplasia, or increase in number, in the lower body, where it increases in size in the upper body. So this leads me to speculate that for competitors who really depend on the look of their legs being leaner, they could possibly stand to incur greater detriment by binges or by periods of being overfat or overweight. But then again, that is just kind of like what we want physique-wise, appearance-wise, is not necessarily what the body wants from a survival standpoint. Because if you are able, the reason why your body is able to increase in the fat cell number in the lower body is to shunt fat storage away from the vital organs. So it's almost like a survival type of adaptation. But if you're in physique sports or anything like that, or you have a problem with legs not coming in lean enough, then
Could be an issue.
It could be an issue. But then again, that's pretty hypothetical too, because increases in fat cell size can be pretty substantial in the upper body as well. So yeah, that's an odd question. I was not expecting that.
Well, I brought it up because I'm curious, and it kind of ties in with fighters, because fighters probably not going to make a difference because they're not concerned about appearance, aesthetics. But I just wanted to know. I wanted to know because I've heard a few things that I just wanted to confirm.
Well,
right.
Another thing I want to add there, Ben, is that with increases in body weight, like massive increases in body weight where you spend some time being obese or morbidly obese, your body produces hormones that kind of the whole goal of the body is to keep the status quo. That's what the body wants to do. So if you stay in an overweight or obese or morbidly obese state, the longer you stay there, then the stronger your body will defend the status quo. And across individuals, there's a lot of variation with respect to appetite. And this is a hormonally regulated thing. So the people who have an easy time chilling at an obese state and a very difficult time being lean, a lot of times it is not necessarily a metabolic or thermogenic difference as much as it is a difference in their levels of the appetite hormones.
Right.
So yeah, it's not really a question of can a 300-pound guy get to 10% body fat. Yes, he can, but he might have a tougher time staying there because he has higher levels of the hunger-stimulating hormones.
I think this is very important for fighters and combat sport athletes, because let's say if you're Tyson Fury. Well, Tyson Fury is a bad example because he's not a weight class athlete. I believe he's in the heavyweight division. It's unlimited weight class, right? I'm not too sure, but I don't know too much about boxing. But in MMA, right? Let's say if you're a 155-pound fighter and you go up to like 240, between camps, you going back down to 155 is going to be an insanely more difficult road because of what you just explained, right? Because of the increased appetite, all this stuff. It's not about whether or not you can do it. It's how hard are you going to make that road back down to that weight class? And I don't know if you know who Matt Serra is.
Yep.
I believe
he's the one guy. He got
GSP.
He got GSP with the leg. He got him in he uses. I forgot what he did.
I believe he just ground and pounded him. Yeah, he just knocked him out, ground and pound. George turned around and tapped. This is probably the greatest upset in history of UFC. I'm pretty sure that's up there. Anderson Silva getting knocked out, probably the second one. But yeah, Matt Serra is a guy. I don't need to know this to speculate, but I think that's what happened to him. Is I would see him between fights at like 220, 240, and he fights at 155.
He's a little dude too.
Yeah, he's a small guy. So I would say that probably put his career, didn't make his career as easy as it could have been, at least the weight cuts. So that's definitely, practical advice for fighters. Do not go crazy in the off season or in between fights and balloon up to a certain weight. I think another guy that ended his career was Johnny Hendricks. You remember that guy? He technically, people say he beat GSP, but GSP retained the title and then retired. But Hendricks just he has a habit of ballooning to 200, 250 pounds, and then he fights at 170, and I could just see the decrease in performance, and just his body started looking like shit. And people say USADA, steroids are involved, but I think it had more to do with the cutting. All right, so let me.
Johnny Hendricks was awesome when he
Yes.
first hit the scene.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, they called him Big Rig, right?
Yeah, this guy was invulnerable, taking shots, and he beat GSP. At least I thought he beat GSP.
That was a real close fight. His last fight that I saw was with Borrachino. What's the name of homie?
Yeah, Paulo Costa, the eraser. Borrachino. That guy
was such a freaking slaughter.
I need to ask you about this guy actually. Do you know what he looks like? Do you know what Borrachino looks like? Okay. So,
I follow him on Instagram.
I gotta follow him too. So I'm gonna ask you a speculative question here. Okay, so
yeah.
Not a single bro in online or on a bar stool thinks that guy is clean. Okay, nobody thinks that guy is clean. Meaning that you cannot look like that without, and like he could. I'm telling you, he could win. What is it called? The Olympia competition where you wear like board shorts. What is that one called?
Men's physique.
He could win the physique. He could win the physique. Like he could win. He's placing top 5. So anyway, what do you think?
Wow.
Can you speculate?
Let's put it this way. And this is, dude, this is honestly not a shot at Brazil. Brazil has their shit together as far as doing everything they can to use every technology possible to make their athletes as freaking awesome as possible.
Does this include circumventing urine and blood tests?
I would say yeah. And you know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's not.
It's like if everybody's on a level playing field and the technology is available and it's a matter of getting with the times. Well, I mean, there's obvious there's major
careers.
Right.
You're prolonging your career. You're making it. Your body's going to recover. You're going to suffer less brain damage. The only problem is, in my take on it is that if you're lying about it and then other people do not have access to the technology and you're punching them in the face, then we have a problem. But what do you think about this guy? So you're telling me Brazil is ahead of the curve. What's happening? If you were a Brazilian sports scientist and you wanted to get your athlete into the UFC, that USADA is a big component of the UFC. Right.
Yeah.
What would you do here? And I'm not asking like I'm gonna do it, but I just want to know what to fight against because I know people are doing this.
Yeah. You know what, man? I've been a long time proponent of just staying natty and being natty and taking the hits that a natty would take and shouldering the disadvantages that a natty would take and in this realm. And it's 100% matter of choice that you want to step in there knowing dudes are on performance enhancing substances. That's your freaking choice. And it just makes any sort of victory over them that much sweeter. If you don't like it, then just get out of the pro ranks because it's being used. It's going to be used. And that's just how it is, man. I don't think that there is a possible way in hell that we can stop the use of it or ban the use of it at the level of the UFC or Bellator, etc. I don't think there's a way to stop that.
Right.
So it's just a matter of choice. I mean, me personally, I wouldn't encourage my close friends and loved ones to get into that game. There are a certain amount of risks that the literature has documented, health risks and such. Now, with certain lower doses at testosterone replacement type doses, it's debatable whether there's much risk at all.
We
in
see
fact,
you on TRT, Alan.
So in other words, you're asking me, is there going to be a regular Alan versus a TRT Alan, just like there was with Vitor? There's
Yes.
like TRT
Yes.
Vitor, and there's regular Vitor, and they're night and day.
Are you going to? Let me just ask you an upfront question. If you get to a certain age where you feel that maybe you're not performing at a certain level, is that something you would consider, or have you considered it? Would you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and nobody's asked me that in any podcast ever, man. By the grace of God, I have been blessed with, I guess, good enough genetics to the degree that physically and functionally and everything like that, I'm doing really well for my age. So if I was experiencing age-related declines in physiology, morphology, functionality, cognition, shoot, man, I can see myself wanting to hop on something, But I just, you know what, man, at the risk of coming off a little too confident, I haven't experienced any kind of enough age-related decline for me to want to get on that. But who knows, man? I'll have to cross that bridge when it comes. It might happen at 70 years old.
And most people don't do it for what you're describing. They do it for performance. They're doing it for, I mean, TRT was legal in the UFC, not that long ago. And I think people were getting exemptions and taking it literally, just being Vitor Belfort's the king of TRT, if you think about this guy, Dan Henderson, these guys that kind of made second careers out of it. I'm pretty sure, I'm just going to name these people. Randy Couture, like, come on. The guy's 46. He won a heavyweight championship, 44 or whatever it was. You tell me he's not a TRT? You kidding me? Come on. Come on. So, all right. So, Alan, I'm going to try to wrap this up shortly, but I want to ask you a couple of things that I think are, they're controversial in the scope of fitness. Like I kind of have an idea, but I have to get these questions. I get these questions like every other day. Okay. The first one is, this is like every day. Sugar, right? Sugar.
Yeah.
There's a ton of sugar alarmism. All right. Like I'm talking, if you even eat one, you put, the sugar in your coffee, you're going to die basically. What would you try to speak to, like fighters, right? Like people that they don't really, they just need the practical, advice, right? What would you say? What should we avoid sugar? Should we avoid fructose? Is there something with fructose specifically?
Yeah. That is all a load of overblown sensationalist bullshit, really. I mean, it's this alarmism stems from the standard Western diet, which is composed of a lot of highly refined and ultra-processed foods, which are a combination of refined carbohydrates, added fats, foods that are just highly engineered and processed and shelf-stable and energy-dense, hyper-palatable.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, all of these foods, it's not just sugar that's the issue. It's the fact that there's a ton of added fats. And in fact, looking at the Western diet historically in the West, in the U.S., the largest increase in calories has come from added fats. It hasn't come from carbohydrates. It's barely come from sugar. And so what happened was the whole idea that sugar is the bad guy really comes from the fact that people don't know what the hell they're talking about.
So that's a huge one. That's actually the thing that I wanted you to clear up on Joe Rogan's podcast. I was like, if I hear another person say sugar is the cause of all evil, cancer, obesity, your dick fell off, whatever. I'm going to go crazy. So with sugar,
Yeah.
it's not, there's nothing wrong with eating sugar, right? Is there anything wrong with eating sugar? Is there anything wrong with specifically fructose, fruit sugar?
Yeah, it's hilarious because fructose was when people got tired of being, pointing the finger at sugar, when that got old, then you have to be even more reductionist and even more micromanagey and point the finger at a subtype of sugar called fructose. That's hilarious because in nature and in the food supply, there's no way you're going to be eating tons of fructose by itself. It always comes with an equal amount of glucose. And the problem with the fructose alarmism thing is people start blaming fruit for their problems. And the research that indicts fructose as something bad is research that takes in these gargantuan amounts of fructose in isolation. And the only way to do that or the only realistic way to do that is to take down 7 to 10 cans of sugar sweetened beverages a day. So that doesn't become a sugar problem or a fructose problem as much as it is a problem with increasing total calories and just decreasing the quality of your diet. Our bodies are perfectly metabolically capable of handling sugar. It's the packaging of sugar within these refined carbohydrate and fat packaged bombs of these snack foods, these packaged snack foods, that are the issue. So these easily overconsumable junk foods that happen to have sugar in them, they also happen to have a lot of fat in them, and they also happen to be inexpensive and highly accessible. That's the issue. It's not sugar per se. You can say the same thing about as far as hyperpalatability goes, or the ability of a food to be overconsumed passively. You can say the same thing about bacon. There's no sugar in bacon. You can eat a shitload of bacon. It's hyperpalatability. There's palatability in the direction of dessert, and there's palatability in the direction of savory foods as well. Like you can eat a shitload of burgers and pizza. There's not a whole lot of sugar there. You can eat a shitload of fries. Fries is not a sugar issue. It's a palatability issue.
Right.
And people just mistakenly take sugar and blow it up into a problem that it's not. And I want to go back to what happened with food consumption in the U.S. Sugar intake increased by 10%. 90% of the increase since the 1970s has come from an even split between refined grain foods and added fats. So sugar increase only made up 10% of that total caloric increase since 1970, which is about 400 to 500 calories. And so sugar is just a really provocative smoking gun to point to because it's what people remember. People remember, sweet taste. They're not remembering, I just ate a fucking donut, which is half fat. Sorry about that, the cussing there. I managed to I managed to not drop.
The fuck cares?
I tried to not drop the F-bomb the whole time, but hey, it was bound to happen, right? So that is the issue. And this is what nobody talks about really on podcasts, and this is something that I would have explained to Joe. And also, a lot of people are looking for what is that bad thing that I need
smoking
to eliminate.
Gun. Yeah, they're looking for the thing they need to villainize. They're
right.
And what they need to look at, I think, is really just look at the foods that also have super high sugar content, and they happen to be like what you described, high calorie content, hyper palatable. They're cheap. Soda, like Coca-Cola, right? Super high sugar, super high calorie. It's for what it is. It's just a drink. Desserts. Candy. Things like that. But as far as for like fighters and combat sports athletes, man, I'm telling you that the athletes that I used to train that, that were in the NFL and people that are in the UFC now, a lot of them are eating a ton of sugar and they're performing just fine. Nothing's falling off. It's not like I'm pushing sugar. It's more like don't make everything about one thing. What you described as alarmism, right? Is making a bigger deal out of something that's not a big deal. So yeah, I want to just like that, just like sugar. I want to rattle off before I let you go a couple other things that I think are like just controversial in the scope. Another one is another thing that I hear fighters talk about all the time: alkaline water. I don't know much about it. I don't know anything about it, to be honest. What do you think about that? Is there any special benefits to alkaline water? Any special waters out there that give me powers?
No. The short answer to that is no. It's a silly deal. Yeah.
Stop spending your money on alkaline water, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about gut health? So this is something that I'll make a more specific question. I get a lot of people, they same with the sugar, right? They're missing the forest for the trees. There's obese people that are just not even exercising, not even dieting properly. They're worrying about gut health, probiotics. They're worrying about, the gut microbiome. What does that play in? What role does that play in performance, in fat loss, in dieting, nutrition, period?
It plays a small role, and there is an emerging body of research that shows some performance benefit to probiotic supplementation. But the body of literature.
What do you mean by probiotic? Because there's a ton.
Yeah, probiotics are the type of microbes that line the digestive tract, and probiotics or our intestinal microbiome or microbiota. It is a very kind of diverse and complex array of microorganisms that exist to contribute to like a multitude of functions in the body. But here's where people take a huge leap of faith. People take a huge leap of faith in thinking that, okay, because there's a little bit of research showing that supplementing the body with certain types of bacteria can improve performance, that they need to do that. That is not necessarily true. In fact, gut health is something that has become a hotbed for quackery and a hotbed for the sale of dubious products. You can look at different diets in different athletes across the full spectrum of, let's say, something like the Atkins diet, like a ketogenic type of diet, all the way up to a vegan Pritikin type of diet. It's high carbohydrate, high fiber, almost like the ideal diet. Now, diets that are associated with gut health are high fiber diets. High fiber diets and diets that have a lot of fermentable foods like miso, tempeh, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, those sort of things, like fermentable foods, basically feed the microbiome, okay? You can look at other diets where people have just consumed an Atkins ketogenic type of diet. The health and body composition of those two populations is pretty much the same as long as protein and calories are in line. And so people making claims about the effects on gut microbiome affecting body composition, that holds very little water, okay? As far as the gut microbiome affecting athletic performance, that is kind of a question mark. But I would say that if it does affect athletic performance, the effects would be very small, and the effects would only be apparent in folks who have very crappy diets, like across the board crap diet. Like if you were to optimize a diet within and across the food groups, optimize it in terms of the macronutrients, I would say that supplementing with probiotics from that point would more often than not be a huge waste of money.
So what would be your practical advice for like fighters or combat sport athletes? Just to eat maybe some yogurt, full fat yogurt. Is there any? What would you tell them? Just if they care about gut health.
Yeah, I would say just eat as much fruits and vegetables, and as you are comfortable with eating digestively, because that's gonna not only improve gut health, but it's also going to have other collateral benefits like prevention of chronic diseases, including.
So would you recommend specific probiotic foods at all?
No. I don't. I just think that the hype behind it doesn't match the science. It doesn't match the science. There are such a diverse. If you look at the longest living populations on the planet, they eat quite a diverse diet, even from each other. The common threads amongst the healthiest possible populations are that they eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and they also eat legumes and whole grains, right? But yeah, none of them. There's no common thread amongst these populations to where you have to eat this type of food to optimize gut health or not. So it is a gray area. I'll give it that, man. There's room for research in this area. I'm not going to make any definitive claims, but I am going to say that there's a lot of bullshit and a lot of hype surrounding the whole gut health thing.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I wanted to clear up. And I've had people tell me that it's all about gut health. It's all about you have to eat kimchi every day and whatnot. And I love kimchi. Nothing wrong with kimchi, but it's just that I wanted to just clear up. Is there any? There's no definitive, right? So that's the most important thing is we don't know. So don't make definitive claims. If you're selling products, especially. All right, yep. I just got a couple more, Alan, and I'm going to let you go.
Sure, man.
You okay? You good on time?
I'm good.
You good? Okay. All right. The other one was, is there any bad foods that you would say, because I get this question a lot too, which is, I've heard, I shouldn't eat whatever, like trans fats or something, but is there anything that you would say for combat sports athletes, just avoid this pretty much all the time or most of the time?
No.
Any classification of food? No, nothing.
No. Here's the deal, man. If your diet is composed 80 to 90% of whole foods or you can call them clean foods, right? Whole foods, minimally refined foods, 80 to 90% of the diet is composed of that. Then the other 10 to 20% can come from whatever you want, and you're still eating a diet that's maximally conducive to health as well as performance. So, that can be anywhere from 300 to 600 calories of kind of whatever amidst, your whatever else you're eating. And on the lower end, it'd be like 200 to 400 calories of whatever you want, in the diet. And with folks who have a huge volume of work output, then that 10 to 20%, that net amount becomes higher. But there's really no evidence pointing to the idea that you need to completely avoid any specific type of food or type of nutrient. And even with something like trans fats, the type of trans fat that gets all the bad press is industrially derived trans fats from hydrogenated oils. So these processed, in quotes, frankenfats that would come from oils that have been chemically hardened or hydrogenated to become more spreadable and shelf stable. Yeah, there's no health benefit to loading up on them. Okay, but at the same time, it's like, all right, the data on those things shows that it can adversely impact blood lipids, but the food sources that you would need to predominate your diet with to get a lot of trans fats are pastries and those type of bakery foods that have used these types of hydrogenated oils. So you'd have to kind of go out of your way to eat a bunch of junk ass pastries in order to get a lot of these bad types of trans fats. Because there's actually trans fats that are not industrially derived, but rather naturally occurring in dairy
meats
and meat, and things like there's something called transvaccinic acid, which has actually shown beneficial effects on health markers. So, you're looking at a subtype of trans fat that people are blowing up into this monster, when in order to practically incur some sort of health detriment, you'd have to just eat a crap load of pastries to get.
Got it. So that's great. This alarmism on certain foods has been bugging me for a while. This one is I can't believe that we're still even talking about this in 2018. But is there anything special with organic foods, grass-fed beef, free-range eggs, naturally labeled products? These classifications. Is it worth spending the extra money on?
That's a really good question. That's a question that's very difficult to study when you look at health effects. What we can look at is nutrient quality. So the nutritional value of conventionally produced foods versus organically produced foods is negligible. So the differences there are negligible. Effects on health would be very difficult to study because they mainly have to be observational designs where you can't establish causation anyway. There is a little bit of literature on organic foods, certain types of organic foods having less heavy metal content. But then again, the long-term health effects of that would be very difficult to study. The things like organic beef or grass-fed beef, the differences there between grain-fed versus grass-fed beef would mainly be in the fatty acid composition of the beef. So there would be a greater amount of omega-3 fatty acids in grass-fed beef. But the difference in omega-3 versus, let's say omega-3, omega-6 in grass-fed versus grain-fed, would only matter if you're depending on your freaking beef intake to get your omega-3 fats. So
Right.
Somebody who is eating fatty fish or eating marine-based omega-3s is already covering that to the point that where they wouldn't have to worry about relying on their beef to get omega-3 fatty acids,
Right.
so they wouldn't have to go get grass-fed beef. The sort of the overall answer to organic versus not is, I gotta say, man, it might take 2 or 3 lifetimes for it to actually matter.
Right.
Like 2 or 3 human lifetimes for
It's a
it to
lot of
matter
money.
health-wise. Yeah, it
That's
is a lot of money,
money
and
to be spending 2 or 3 lifetimes organic food.
right,
Oh man.
it's a first world problem
Yes, for
to
sure.
worry about organic versus conventionally produced foods, and there's even like with organic stuff, like pesticide-free stuff. I mean, the organic pesticides can be just as dangerous or risky as
I used to
inorganic.
work on I shouldn't say I used to work. I worked one day on an organic farm in Hawaii. And yes, they used pesticides. And guess what?
Yeah,
These pesticides looked old as shit. So I don't know what I would personally rather have new technology pesticides than these old, like I'm telling you, these things had dust on them. These pesticides that we used in this organic farm, and there were bugs everywhere, by the way. And then we were picking things by hand. It was an experience. But yeah, um, I've been battling, that for a while as well, just in my own head. Just, should I be buying organic? Does it matter? But I once made a comment online. I think that I've never gotten so much backlash for this comment in my life, and
mhm.
it was when the grass-fed beef craze was just like out of control. I think this was like when when paleo was just like taken over. And I made a
Yeah.
comment. So I made a status or something got a comment on a forum. And I just said, look, I'm not going to be able to eat grass-fed beef all the time. I work a full-time job. I'm a coach. You know, I do all these things on the side. I have to eat out like literally half the day. You know, so for me to go out of my way to eat grass-fed beef, it's not going to happen. All right. So Walmart steak is going to do for now. And I just by saying the words Walmart and steak in one sentence, I must have had like the biggest backlash of my life. Oh man,
Wow.
I was called like a retard, idiot, anyway. So I'm glad that you at least cleared up the if you're just consuming omega-3s, why spend the money on grass-fed beef? It's not even the purpose of what you can do. And the funny thing is, most of the grass-fed beef I see at Whole Foods, Sprouts, these stores, they're lean. they're
Exactly.
super lean. So
that's exactly the point. You're not relying on steak to get your fats. It's
right.
just,
that's exactly the point.
It's an backward asinine concept.
Yes. All right, Alan. Last question for you.
Sure.
Last thing. This is for sure going to be a controversial topic. Is marijuana. So a lot of fighters, they ingest marijuana via smoking or via eating things, or I think there's two parts to this question. Okay, one is just the THC, right? The smoking, ingesting, edibles, things like that, and then there's the non-psychoactive. And this second part of the question is probably the question I get more than any other question. Is CBD oil. Is there any benefits to CBD oil? And then is there any benefits to ingesting smoking marijuana?
Okay. This is going to be a research-based answer, not an experience-based one. But CBD oil has a very interesting body of research in its effectiveness on certain neurodegenerative disorders. So specifically the psychiatric disorders. And it has been shown, CBD has been shown to effectively treat or at least alleviate the symptoms of things like psychosis, anxiety, even epilepsy and Parkinson's disease. So there is a research basis to at least further investigate CBD for those types of disorders. As far as its effect on athletic performance, there's no research out there. So
what about recovery?
Recovery?
Yeah.
No. There's no training related research out there on CBD oil that I know of. And I think it's bound to happen because the stuff is pretty huge commercially.
One of the things that is just blowing up is the use of the creams, right? So CBD oil or CBD cream, is there I mean, I guess it's not really a nutrition question, but it seems like that's a whole market, So is there anything with that? No research, no conclusive.
I only know of the nutritional side of stuff, and how it would potentially affect performance or body composition. It's being marketed for everything now. I mean, it's being marketed to be able to
panacea.
It's being marketed to be able to get people more fit, improve body composition and stuff. And there is no research that you can point to that would give those claims any sort of basis at all. Just mainly, psychiatric disorders and certain neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, epilepsy. Yeah, the potential is there, but I don't see the biologically plausible mechanism for it to actually improve athletic performance. Even if you talk about recovery and things like that. No. And as far as like THC goes, the actual psychoactive element of cannabis, there was a systematic review that was put out. I actually pulled this up. It's by Kennedy. Yeah, it's a 2017 systematic review by Kennedy. And his conclusion, as a result of pouring through the literature and rooting everything out, is that THC does not enhance strength or aerobic exercise performance. So that's a systematic review on that just came out in 2017. So anybody who thinks that their THC use will actually improve performance is that does not have a scientific basis.
So Nick Diaz essentially served a 2-year suspension for nothing then.
Yes.
He got
Absolutely,
popped for
yeah.
it, served 2-year suspension for not having his performance increased.
Exactly.
Well, that sucks. That sucks. But yeah, I mean, it's prevalent. You know, I'm not gonna throw out a random number, but I would say the majority of fighters that I know, combat sports athletes, especially jiu-jitsu. If you do jiu-jitsu, you know, smoking marijuana, you know, ingesting marijuana, it's like part of it. It's like the 3 things, right? There's 4 things: smoking marijuana, doing jiu-jitsu, surfing, acai. There you go. Those 4 things are just, you know, all in there, and then probably throw CrossFit in there too. Those 5 things. Everybody that's in that community does all those things together. But anyway, man, this is awesome, Alan. Let's see how long we went. We went here almost 3 hours. So this could 2 hours and 40 minutes so far. So this could make up for your Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, dude. Well, you know, we talked a lot more about combat sports than I thought we would, which is great. That's your world. I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to mesh with me being in the bro world of guys who just want to, you know, they just want to have some abs on the beach or by the pool, and you know,
I think it meshed great.
I think it went great.
I think it meshed great, and I think that more importantly, it shows how much of a lack of knowledge the combat sports world has, because what you just, I mean, I know a lot about nutrition, you know, and you just taught me in that 2 hours and 45 minutes, probably 10 to 20 things that I need to now consider and you know, add to my coaching as well. So if I can learn 10 to 20 things, there's people out there who could probably learn 100 things. And I'm super happy that you came on, Alan. I really appreciate you. Like I said in the beginning, you know, you've done a lot for me as a friend, as a mentor, as somebody who's helped me see the evidence side of things. You know, I was a bro, you know, from day one. You know, I was not eating fat and not eating certain things, is afraid of high fructose corn syrup. I was the biggest bro in the world, you know, and if it wasn't for finding your stuff and Lyle McDonald's stuff and you know, certain other people in the industry, I probably would be a dummy forever, to be honest. So is there anything that first of all, is there anything I could do for you? And then is there anything that you want the listeners to check out? I know you're at the Alan Aragon on Instagram.
That's right.
And then you also have a subscription-based research review, $10 a month. What's the website again for that? Is it alanaragon.com?
That's right.
alanaragon.com.
Yeah. alanaragon.com, yep.
$10 if you don't get this subscription, I don't know what you're doing, because it is, I learn probably 5 to 10 new things every month from the research review. Thank you for that, Alan. What's your email in case anybody needs to reach out?
Sure. You can reach me at alaneats@gmail.com. Yeah,
Alan Eats.
Yep. Anyone can read Alan Eats. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of the rules for MMA, the rules for combat sports are not magically different sports nutritionally than the rules for other mixed sports within that part of the energy continuum. You know what I mean? Like, people have this tendency to want to believe that there's some special magic that needs to go on with MMA, with combat sports. But there is so much overlap and most of the same principles that would help sprinters, that would help boxers, that would help soccer players. You know, a lot of that just, it applies to combat sports as well. Combat sports is not the magic realm where keto suddenly works better than everything else. No, you'll see people falling flat on their face as a result of doing that. But yeah, dude, it is definitely an honor to get invited on your show. I think you're doing amazing work. If there's anything that you can do for me, I'd like to cruise down by Torrance and maybe you could teach me some lethal techniques. Just so
I'm not in Torrance anymore. I'm in Arcadia now. I'm in Arcadia.
Oh, cool.
So
not too far.
Pasadena, I have two academies, three academies. One in Pasadena, one in Montrose, La Cañada area, and then one in Arcadia. So yeah, anytime you like, come down, train. I'll teach you some rear naked chokes, some arm drags, the basic stuff that'll work right away, hopefully.
Ninja stuff. I want to learn ninja stuff.
The funniest thing I forgot to mention is that, I did this because I wanted Joe to, I wanted you to be on the JRE podcast, right? But what I realized is that you guys live pretty much like, you guys are pretty much neighbors. Because I have people who I train jiu-jitsu with that know Joe personally, and he's in that valley area, and I know you are too. You're in that valley area too. So I'm like, come on, can't make it work. But
it's the ball is in their court, man. I'll still go on if they want me, but they just had like Mel Gibson on there and stuff, and I'm thinking, shoot, they're never gonna ask me on now. So.
You might be the Mel Gibson of nutrition, so you.
Yeah, exactly. So. So
it's all good. I'll tweet this out to him, and
that might be a selling point.
Yeah,
that might be a selling point.
There it is. All right, Alan. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben.